Awesome.
My name is Andrea Kim Taylor. I work with Megan and Margaret at the Phillips Collection in education, and I primarily work with school parks and school programs.
Cool.
I'm not very loud, but my name is Ashley Deep. I am an interactive media producer at the Smithsonian Science Education Center.
Oh, great.
I'm Amanda Perez, and I'm a designer at the National Archives and the Exhibitions Office.
Andy Finch, Digital Media and Technology for your Sackler.
Hey, Kellyanne, it's Bridget.
Hey.
And hello, Kellyanne. It's Erin from Blue Center as well.
Hey, how you doing?
Some of these scavenger hunts, and we're excited to get feedback from you guys.
And I'm Valeria, SA Mobile.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you guys so much for I don't know, for meeting me today. It's such a strange thing. I'm like, for meeting me for hanging out today? What do you say? Not quite sure. Okay, so let me take a look at, let me find what I'm looking for in the first place. And it's this, and I am going to make it large. And so I'm just going to let it take over my screen, so I'll be able to hear you guys, but I won't be able to see you while I'm doing that, if that's okay.
Yes.
All right. So let me know if you have any trouble, as you're as you see things, and also just holler if you have any questions. So I was so excited when I heard that Smithsonian Games and Smithsonian Mobile were getting together and joining forces to create all sorts of new trouble, because that's absolutely what I love to do, is mobile games, and especially location-based games. And so, yeah, I hope we can build some stuff and test some stuff, and I can't wait to see what you guys are creating. So I'll just kind of quickly go through. So I have a group called Green Door Labs, and we're game design development. We have a platform that we call the Adventure Builder, and we pretty much just build mobile interactive experiences. And I've been around for about maybe two and a half years with Green Door Labs. Before that, I ran cultural programs for Scavenger. And so I've been doing specifically location-based mobile games for cultural institutions for, oh gosh, it's almost been 7 years now, which is a ridiculous amount of time. Can't believe it's been that long. But it's been really fun, because I've been able to see from the very beginning, back like at the nascence of Foursquare, how people were responding to location, what they expected it to be able to do, what it could do, what it couldn't do. So I figured what I'd do today is just go through like a bunch of different things that I've played with, and kind of look at some similarities and some differences, and answer any questions that you guys might have about things that I've done. I've built 3 different mobile games at the Smithsonian, starting with the Go Smithsonian Trek with Smithsonian. With Go Smithsonian, and with the magazine, and Beth Pye Lieberman, which was awesome. They did an incredible job marketing it. And then we did Agents of Change, which we did in collaboration with Cami Clough and Aaron Brasco and the Girl Scouts of America. And that was really fun, and it was sort of Nancy Proctor was a big driver of that game, and the American Museum of American History sort of was the go-to place for that. And then this third one that we're doing with Aaron and Bridget at the American Art Museum is sort of testing out this new platform and seeing what we can do with it. So I'm excited to have you guys take a look at it. So first, I thought we would take maybe 30 seconds and just think to yourself, what do you think of when you think of a location-based game? So go ahead, take a second. What do you think of? What is a location-based game to start with?
It's something that changes based on your place in the world.
Okay, so something that changes based on location. What else?
When I think of the word game, I think there's rules and effects to your moves within the game.
I'm sorry, tell me again? I can't hear you. You're a little garbled.
Yeah, it might be an issue with the card number not going through correctly.
There's rules.
Okay. This is true. Games do have rules. So anything else? Did anybody else think of anything when you said location-based game? Did anything come to mind? Any specific games? No, nothing.
I would think that there might be some sort of temporal element to it too.
Sure.
just because if you're expecting, it's kind of the next step in it, right? If it
Sure.
knows where I am, it should know when I am too.
Sure. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, like a time-based game as well. Cool. So I went through a couple of different categories that I like to go through. So here's sort of a brief history of location-based games. I like to define location-based games as games that interact with objects. So maybe that object is outside, maybe it's inside, but there's a physical element to the game that you're playing. Sometimes they're GPS, but not always. And so this is just kind of a cool overview of location-based games. It really helped starting with GPS in 1999. Then we could all of a sudden do these map-based games that we couldn't have done before. And now we've got all sorts of amazing stuff that you can do. Ingress, I think, is probably the most popular location-based game that you can play right now. And is anybody playing Ingress currently?
Well, it works on my end. I see all the survey.
No? You guys should play it. It's great. You're going to love it. So when GPS came out, then you had sort of GPS-based games, and that was sort of, your Scavenger, your Foursquare, your Koala, and these were all games that interacted with the GPS on your phones. And so they tried to do a bunch of different things with that. So they started with just check-ins with Foursquare. Scavenger tried to make it into a scavenger hunt. Niantic or Ingress has tried to use Google Maps to try and make different types of games. But one thing that was really interesting and difficult as we were trying to build these things out is that in fact, I just got a panicked call from the Spy Museum yesterday. They were like, oh my God, we just recalibrated all of our GPS stuff and none of the GPS is working. And I was like, yeah, because that's what happens with GPS, because GPS is really, really challenging. Eats up your battery. It's an awful lot of work to get it built in the first place. It's really hard to edit it once you're there. So people are trying to do all sorts of different things to get around GPS so that we won't have to use that as our way to find location anymore. So there's Wi-Fi triangulation, and then there's things like Lightbyte, where you can use lights inside a location to triangulate where you are. Frankly, after 7 years of doing this, I think the best way to find out where people are is to ask them. And for all the trouble that you have to go through with GPS, it really does not seem to give you much of a return on your investment. So that's just my personal opinion, and you definitely can play around with a bunch of different stuff. There's a platform called Aris, A-R-I-S, which is a really good location-based platform to build things out on. But again, if you're going to use the GPS, you really want to have something to do with it. Then there's just these awesome analog location-based games. Never underestimate the power of a regular old paper scavenger hunt. I mean, you can do these letterboxes. Letterboxes are fantastic. Have a little tiny box, leave it in a hidden location, go to that hidden location, have a clue to the next location. I mean, this is an awesome game, fabulous game dynamic, and it costs next to nothing. I mean, this is just a good idea, and people love playing these things. There's nothing more fantastic than finding a hidden item and having a riddle to get to the next hidden item. So then, this is something that I think is a kind of interesting way to do location-based games. You can have games that are built for certain locations, but that don't necessarily have any sense of like things hidden, messages hidden, GPS trackers, anything like that. Murder at the Met was a game like that, where technically you could play it if you were sitting at home, but it's not as much fun because the whole idea is go and take a look at this piece of art and talk to this piece of art and get the witness testimony, and it just makes it more interesting. It's sort of the location enhances the game that you're playing. Getty Switch was the same type of game where you probably could play it on a phone. In fact, they have an online version, but putting it in a physical location just makes it a lot more fun. Then there's stuff like Operation Spy at the Spy Museum. They have their 2 location-based games that are running. One that brings you throughout the city, and then the one that's physically in the museum. And that is incredible. That is like one of the best games that's running. If you haven't played it yet, you should definitely go. It is not a mobile game. It is a full set that they built out, and they run people through it, and it's really fun. RevQuest is another really great game that was built for locations. So same thing, it's not necessarily GPS based, they don't necessarily have things hidden, it's all text based, but they have a storyline. I believe that is in, oh my goodness, does anybody remember where RevQuest is from? Now I'm blanking out.
Colonial Williamsburg?
That's right, you're right, Colonial Williamsburg. which is just such a cool idea to sort of combine that old and new. So that's, again, that seems to be really working well. Constantly updating information. One of the better games that I think is running location-based mobile game is Phineas and Ferb. It's running at Epcot. Has anybody played this yet? Has anybody been to Epcot and played Phineas and Ferb?
I've seen kids playing it, and they're super engaged.
Oh my God, yeah, they are so into it. I mean, that was like the perfect location-based game, a perfect environment, right? Because here you're in Epcot and you've got all these countries around the world, and you are with Agent Perry the Platypus, and you are trying to thwart the evil Professor Doofenshmirtz. And you go to all these different countries, and you have to find the professor in each of these different countries. You guys actually have the freedom to do something like that as well, because you have multiple locations on the same campus. So definitely a possibility if you can kind of, get people on board with something like that. So something that's really interesting about location-based games, they are totally different from a video game. So when you play a video game, then really all you've got to deal with is one person sitting in front of a screen at some point or another. You own their attention. They are yours for that time that you are playing them. But your players are not alone when you're playing a location-based game. And so you really need to think about what you're dealing with. In the real world, you've got people, and you've got lots of them. And you can work with that, or you can work against it. But the catch is you really got to take that into consideration when you're building any sort of mobile location-based game. I call it museum lockdown. When people walk into a museum, typically it's an extremely high-stress situation for them. I didn't know this 6 years ago, actually. I was shocked to find this out, but I was yelled at by enough people in museum lobbies trying to get them to play games to realize how stressed out these people were. So they physically walk into the lobby. Maybe they've got their kids with them. They're really hoping their kids have a good time. Maybe they've got a significant other. They're trying to impress someone on a date. Or maybe they brought a spouse. They're trying to have a special spouse day. In general, it's not the same environment as when you're approaching somebody who's sitting on their couch. People are pretty amped up when they walk through the door. So I like to say that you have 15 seconds to never mind, because it doesn't take very long for people to just say, I can't get in, never mind, I'm going to go just do it on my own. And of course it's fine when they do it on their own, but if you have the opportunity to guide them a little bit, then you want to take that. And that's why we run these location-based games in the first place. Give people not necessarily a very hard and fast way that they have to explore the space, but give them some options of things that they might not have thought of looking at before. So the key really is to let people feel smart. Like, people want to feel smart. They want to feel competent. And so when they walk into a museum, and you say, hey, we have this new game and it's really awesome. First of all, you sort of have to get over that game barrier, that sense of, what, I'm smart enough, I can look at art, don't worry, why do I have to play a game? I'm not an idiot. I can view high culture, it's okay. But once they get past that, then you're like, okay, well, this is how you play the game. Just download the app. And anybody who has run these games or these apps in physical spaces knows that there's just so many ways to fail. There's just so many pathways to fail. And you say, just download the app. Yeah, it's easy. It's like, okay, well, do you have a smartphone? Yes. Okay, I have this type of phone. Oh, is it a smartphone? No, it's a dumb phone. Oh, can't play. Fail. Right, so that's one pathway. Is it a smartphone? Oh, yeah. Is it Android? No, it's a BlackBerry. Oh, no, sorry, can't play, fail. Oh, okay, well, it's an iPhone. Great. All right, do you know your password? No. Oh, fail. No, it's my mom's phone. Oh, it's spinning. Oh, I can't get through. I can't give away my email. There's just so many ways that you can lose people when they're standing in a lobby getting ready to play something. And so there's a couple of rules that I've sort of come together with as I've run different games at the museum, at the Smithsonian museums, and at other museums as well. First one is low barrier to entry. Most important thing in your entire game is that first 5 seconds is just getting people into it in the first place. And the key to that, a lot of the times, one of the best quotes that I've ever heard was from this group here in Boston called Fablevision. And they said the best way to get somebody into a game is to have known game dynamics and market quality graphics. And I think that those are fantastic. Really good rule of thumb. Known game dynamics, market quality graphics. I think that's one of the reasons why Murder at the Met was so successful, because people opened it up and they're like, oh, this is Clue, okay, and they just went right in. They didn't have to learn the rules, they didn't have to figure it out, and of course it was the Met's art team, and they just made it absolutely gorgeous. We were working with them it was actually really quick. We built that whole thing in about 2 months, and the Met's art team was just such rock stars and built out some really gorgeous stuff. And Getty Switch, I think, was also really popular because it's so easy to get into it. Really simple dynamic, I Spy. And if you haven't met Susan Edwards from the Getty, she is awesome. And she and I have been sort of building out location-based games for almost the same amount of time. It's been about, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years. The two of us have been like, okay, what are people not responding to? And every time either of us release a game, they get simpler and simpler and simpler. She released Switch and she was like, look, it's only one button. I was like, oh, you won. That's incredible. Because it's all about making it accessible, making it something that people can get into, sort of a simple door. Fion, which was sort of the famous failure, and such a wonderful risk, but unfortunately it was just too complicated, and that was sort of the death knell for Fion. Was how do I get in? I don't know. You have 15 seconds to Nevermind. People aren't going to wait around to figure out how to play your game. They're busy. They've got things to do. So something else that's really interesting is, rather than pretending that you don't have people standing there with big groups of people around them, you really need to think about those group dynamics. What's going to happen? What are they going to do? How many people are there? How are they interacting with each other? And I thought a really good example of predicting group dynamics properly and not properly was at Disney World. And so Disney World had these 2 great games. One of them was Phineas and Ferb, Agent P's World Adventure Showcase, and the other one was Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom. So Agent P, what they did was they delivered most of the information on the phone. If you kind of look over there, I don't have a mouse, but if you kind of look at the phone on the far left-hand side that they're holding, I mean, it is just an old school phone. I mean, not even a smartphone. It's like a clamshell. But at the same time, they delivered all of this animation. Most of the important information was delivered right on the phone. And so people would do the thing that they had to do, and then they would walk away from the group, and then they would get the next piece of information. They would get the next clue. Brilliant. Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom, they totally lost, unfortunately, because as you see on the far right-hand corner, all of their information was delivered on screens. Well, how are you going to get that screen? In a crowded room, well, you're going to stand there and you're going to wait in line for the other people who are also playing the game while the screen displays all the rest of the story that you don't want to know yet because you haven't unlocked it. So I think that was sort of a failure to recognize the group dynamics. Phineas and Ferb delivered all their information on the phone so people could walk away from the group. Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom didn't think about that, delivered all their information on these massive screens, and so literally you were standing in line for up to 20 minutes before you could go to the next step. Again, 15 seconds to Nevermind. It doesn't take people very long to play that and be like, oh, forget it, I got stuff to do. They're in the world, they're busy, they've got a million distractions. We also like to say that your game is only as good as its ability to engage your youngest player. Because if you're playing a game with a family and you've got a 4-year-old and that 4-year-old is hungry or tired or has to go to the bathroom, your game is over. So it's really good to tell people how long they're going to play for, and then give them breaks in between. Oh, you happen to be sitting on this beautiful fountain, take a rest and look at the fountain, think about life. Or we noticed that you're next to the cafe. Awesome, we have really good cookies, have a seat, grab a cookie, we'll see you in 10 minutes. So predict those things about how people are going to interact. Create time, space, and permission to play. So I apologize. As I got the email today, was like, Kellyanne's going to tell you all about the specific games that she created for the Smithsonian. And I was like, oh no, those pictures are not in my PowerPoint. So if you have any questions about the specific Smithsonian games, then we can chat about them afterwards, and I'd be happy to answer just as you shout them out. But all of these things also applied to the Smithsonian games. really, really important to give people permission to play, because when people walk into the museum, there's this sense of like, should I be doing this? You know, again, very different from a video game. On a video game, you're at home, so it's okay, you can do whatever you want. If you have some sort of a paper-based game, then clearly somebody from the museum handed you a piece of paper. Paper's kind of official looking. But when you do something on the phone, there's this rogue element to it. Like maybe you're taking pictures when you shouldn't be. Maybe you're texting your friends. People are really highly sensitive about making sure they don't look like they're being jerks in the museum. They want to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. RevQuest did a really, really awesome job with that. A lot of it had to do with marketing. Operation Spy did the same thing. Really created the time. I think key is telling people ahead of time how long we think they're probably going to be taking on this. This is probably going to be about an hour, plan for an hour. So if you reach out to people ahead of time so that they show up prepared to play, that just goes a long way. That helps a lot. Getting the word out. The Smithsonian Trek was amazing at this. One thing that they did that I thought was just sort of a go-to, like you totally have to do this, they had sort of a blogger breakfast internal launch. And I think every game should have some sort of an internal launch. So they just sent out the email to all of their bloggers and all the press and all Smithsonian friends and family and employees, everybody internally, to test the game before anybody else. And so then people started sort of writing about it, and they were like, oh, this is awesome, the Smithsonian has a scavenger hunt and it's really fun. And then after that, they had a kickoff, and their kickoff was like, play the Smithsonian scavenger hunt, the winner gets an iPad. And I mean, this was 2011, so it was a big deal to get an iPad. They had just come out. In fact, an iPad is probably the best marketing that you can ever do. Offer, an iPad or a tablet or something, some fun little piece of technology that you can win. And you get people coming out in droves, and there's this sense that they're competing against each other. You have an event, you have all these pictures that you can use for marketing now. So the sort of tester breakfast was really key, and then that sort of kickoff was also really key. For Agents of Change with the Girl Scouts, it was a very different situation because it wasn't open to everybody. It was only open to the Girl Scouts. We only had those 2 weeks. So we tried to really seed the game before they showed up. They showed up, I don't remember what the date was, but they showed up closer towards the end of the game. I think it was like the 15th or something that they were actually in DC. And but we tried about a week before, around the 7th, we released the game and told people about it. Hey, the game is coming. Here's some emails. What do you think you're going to collect? What do you think this story is like? Sign up for your account. Sort of pre-prepping people before they got there. Go Smithsonian Trek was probably one of the most successful games that Scavenger ever ran. By the time it came down, I want to say we had probably about 3,000 individual people who had really gone through the Trek, like not just hit it, but had gotten to at least 5 different questions. Here's another random little bit of information that is useful. When people are playing location-based games, I find that it takes them between 5 and 8 minutes to get from one location to the next, depending on how close the locations are. So usually I time that out. I don't usually make them go to more than about 8 to 12 places. When you're inside a museum, then you can get up to 12 because sometimes they're right next to each other. But you don't want people to play for really more than about an hour and a half for a competitive game, is as long as you can keep people. They start to sort of peter out after about an hour, and that's fine. Really what these games are just a door. You're just getting them into the museum. You're just giving them a different lens to view the museum. You want them to sort of look at things differently and enjoy themselves, have a good time, maybe give you some feedback. But if people sort of drop off, that's not the end of the world. That's pretty standard for a location-based game. Be flexible and move with users. I'm pictureless for this. I'm so sorry. So I've got nothing to show you. But it's still a really interesting thing to think about. One of the biggest reasons that we created the Adventure Builder was because we needed something that would let us build games fast and edit them fast, because every user, every group, every museum needs something so different, and it's really difficult to be able to build things fully and then sort of release them. So if you're creating a brand new app, they're really expensive to produce, and then once they're produced, they're really hard to make edits. So, Adventure Builder obviously is not the only platform in the world. There are some really good platforms to be building games off of. Again, things like, Eris, RevQuest, I think, was built off of I want to say it was OnCell's, just regular old text. There's something called Quest, which is also sort of interactive text-based games. Platforms are going to help you to move with your users. Otherwise, unless you have a really strong internal tech team that you can say, hey guys, nobody seems to understand the pathways that we're giving them to such and such. Nobody wants to take pictures, and they'll just go in and they'll make the edits and send it out. But most of the time, you're going to have to edit. You're going to have to hire the tech team to do that. So build expecting the game to fail at certain points. We like to say no game ever survives its first player. So just kind of expect when people start playing, you're going to have to make changes. When you release it, that is never the end item. And this is just sort of a random thing because I think it's really an exciting change in location-based games. There's a new type of location-based game, and it's being called a localized game. Localized games are games that use mobile technology. You have to be physically with other people, but you don't necessarily have to be in a physical space. So it doesn't necessarily interact with the objects, it doesn't interact with the GPS, but it does interact with the people who are around you. You have to play it that way. So one of those games is Space Team. You should totally play Space Team. It's a great game, and just really interesting the way that they've set up that game. It's a new type of dynamic. Heads Up is another one. Not as good as Space Team. I mean, this is a new game dynamic, but definitely worth checking out as you're thinking about new types of things to build. And that is pretty much it. That is my overview of all things mobile and location based. So I will return to you. I'll sort of keep that there so you can see. There we go. Awesome. Now I see you again. Hello. So, do you guys have? Oh my goodness! Wow, that's like the infinity. That's.
Oh, what's happening?
That was not what I was expecting at all. Okay, there we go. So can you see me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yay. All right. So there we go. So, there's sort of your quick and dirty what I have learned from location-based mobile games. So what are you guys building? Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions about the Smithsonian-specific games that we've run before?
You come here, so you're sitting, you have to shout.
One second, we're rearranging.
Oh, got it. Okay, no problem.
Hot seat.
Oh, I see new people. Hello.
Hi. I'm Margaret. I'm from the Phillips Collection. And I'm curious if you could maybe talk a little bit about your process of getting from maybe like a prototype and brainstorming stage to a final product on a mobile device, if you did any prototyping and suggestions you might have in that process.
Oh, yeah. I would love to show you that. Okay, ready? I'm going to go back to sharing my screen a little bit because I'll show you the process that we go through. So here's my desktop. Start my screen share. And let's see. Give me just a second as I find this. Let's see. Let's take a look at the Boston Children's Museum. Step 1. There we go. That's a PDF. You can take a look at that. Okay. So, yeah. So the process that we go through, actually, so this is sort of a template that we use. We have sort of stages that we go through in our process, and I'll show you. You'll get a sneak peek at what we're playing with the Boston Children's Museum project. So this is stage 1. Stage 1, we sit down in a room and we literally map out our goals, restrictions, and resources. So we like to say what we want to accomplish. First your elevator pitch. your sort of two-second line. You know, this is going to be mobile experience for this age group and families before and after the museum visit. So you want to be able to boil it down to what you're trying to accomplish. And then we separate it into two things. The museum will be able to, and visitors will be able to. So this is part of our regular old design process. You know, you want to be really careful to make sure that when you have the museum will be able to and visitors will be able to, that it's really clear stuff. You know, you want to be able to say, like, the museum will be able to you know, connect with visitors before and after the museum visit. They'll be able to get press in at least 3 different local magazines. We'll be able to get at least 500 people to play this game between now and June. You know, make sure that the goals are pretty clear. For this one, it was interesting because one of the most important things for them was to collect information. And we only really figured that out when we all sat down and we're like, okay, what do we want out of this? And they're like, actually, we need to test. And so we just needed to, as we built it, it was like, okay, this is for testing, therefore everything we build in here has to have analytics. You know, that was an important thing. Next, we talk about restrictions. Again, this is literally a template that we use, and we fill the whole thing out because you cannot do all the things. And in fact, restrictions help you out a ton. What can we not do? What can we just get off the table right now? They had a flat budget. No gush was allowed. It had to be geographically diverse. It was an exhibit that was going to be connected to 40 different museums across the United States. So although it was mobile and they wanted a location-based element to it, it couldn't actually be tied to one physical location because it was moving. Really interesting restriction. Specifically working with kids, also working with foreign cultures, so we need to be super, super careful about what we say and what we do with it, COPPA regulations, and I'll show you in a second sort of what we decided to do with all this. It was kind of fun. Want to make sure that we weren't reductionist, very important as well, and then we work with resources. What do we got? You know, like, what do we got? Who can we possibly use? When you're working with museums, I mean, budget is always an issue and time is always an issue. So you never have unlimited budget. You never have unlimited time. Usually you don't have unlimited tech resources. You know, it's not like you just happen to be hanging around, you know, Kendall Square in Boston and, oh, everybody's a technologist and is willing to donate, you know, all of their resources for free. That's not usually, you know, something you have. So you really have to pull from everywhere you've got. You know, can you get any interns? What platforms exist that you can poke at? Can you call in any favors? Do you have existing content? We were working with the Stratford Hall Museum out in Virginia, and one of their resources was squirrels. They had lots of squirrels on campus. It was kind of a funny story. It was the Lee family homestead. The Lees also have a squirrel as part of their sort of logo, and so we decided to make the story about squirrels. And so we created the Squirrel Lee University Field Research Institute, where you have to be doing historical research by and for squirrels. And it's, you know, we're in the testing stages, but it's fun, you know, and we were working with what we have. So really working with what you have is kind of awesome. And stop me at any point, because I know this is like a really long and drawn out answer to your quick question. Is this sort of going the direction that you were thinking?
Yes, that's helpful.
Okay. No one else can help, we can move on to the next.
Okay, cool. So yeah, stop me if I am going too far. And then we figured out what are our next steps. Okay, so stage 2. That was our stage 1. Stage 2 is where you start to throw ideas at the wall. So here was stage 1, we got that, now what? Okay, stage 2, what are our consistent features? Okay, we know that whatever it is that we do, it has to be story-based, modular, and there has to be varied interaction. So we throw a bunch of things right out the window to start with. We're like, okay, what is this not like? Well, can't be like Toca Boca, it can't be like Planet Mania. We just don't have the resources at this point to create essentially a sprite-based game, right? So, okay, and for you guys, maybe it would be something different. You know, maybe you would throw text out the window. You know, you're working with art. A lot of your people, it needs to be visually accessible, so it has to be all images. But it's really important to sort of drill down what you are not. Somewhat similar to this, you know. So throw out some stuff that your project is going to look kind of like. We like to go into Pinterest. Pinterest, you kind of create a general board, invite everybody, and then you just start throwing up all sorts of ideas. You know, well, I like this vision, I like that vision. Let people show you projects that they already like. And then we started thinking about the parts that, okay, we have to have. We have to have 3 different parts to it, most likely. So here are the have-tos. And this is the direction, the general direction that we think it's going to go in. And then we start throwing storylines out there. I usually like to do 3 storylines to start with. You know, here are 3 different ways that this could potentially go. And then when you find one, then you start making it a little bit more serious. So we talk about the tone, the benefits, the drawbacks, and what is it like. So what is it like is like a really good thing to think about. You know, you play a bunch of different things, and what is this game like? What are kids going to think about? So what we ended up doing with this particular one was we decided, we chose Asia Daily, Ace Reporter. We decided to go on sort of a reporter feel to it. Here are our next steps. Now we're on to stage number 3, where we're drilling down. We're drilling down on our storyline. And so now with our storyline, we had to decide, like, what is it actually going to look like? So here, so we decided to model it after Carmen Sandiego. You know, so stage 1, you know, sort of wide berth, goals, restrictions, resources. Stage 2, how can we achieve what we want to with those goals, restrictions, and resources? Stage 3, the pathway that we chose, what can we do with it? So we created, you know, sort of pathways. Balsamiq is a really, really good tool for creating these sort of frameworks. So we were sort of drawing out what we think it's going to look like. It's going to look something like this. It's going to be sort of Carmen Sandiego-ish, where, you know, you're going to go to a city and you're looking for somebody, and you're going to interview different people, and they're going to give you information. We're going to include video. So, you know, drawing out all this stuff. Here are different storylines. All right, so we're still with our sense of, yeah, we still have this reporter idea, but then how could you do the reporter? You know, what are these different stories? So we came up with these storyline details, and then we brought them to an artist, and the artist sort of wrote out the storyline details. And right now we are testing with kids in the museum. And that's sort of the process that we go through. So, you know, we'll test, we'll find out how the kids respond, which of the stories they like. So far, they seem to really be going for the blogger story, which is like awesome for us. Do I have some pictures of it that I can show you? No, not right here. But yeah, they're going for the blogger story, which is great. Once we get that, then we'll be able to start building out a paper prototype, and then bringing it back onto the floor and saying to the kids, you know, okay, you know, when you press these buttons, what do you think? Can you do that? Do you understand this? And then after we've done all of that, you know, like it's a long pathway until you finally get to the part where you're building something. Then we start building it into the system. That was a really, really long answer. So.
One follow-up question, Kelly. When you tested the different stories, how did you do that? Did you just ask kids, like, do you think this makes sense? Or so you show them?
Well, so it really depends on what museum it is that you're working with. Let's see. What are you guys seeing? Can you still see? Can you see me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. I was just checking. I was like, what is there? It depends on what you're looking for, right? So it always goes back to those goals. So I'm testing concepts right now with 2 museums. They're testing, you know, and daily I'm getting responses from kids. For the Boston Children's Museum, because getting that information and testing the process was such an important part of what they needed to get out of this project, they actually hired an evaluator. And this is an evaluator that they worked with, and the evaluator put together this really comprehensive, very good evaluation of, here are 3 different stories. Which one do you like? Here are 3 different images. Have you ever heard of Carmen Sandiego before? Does this remind you of anything? So she actually drew out like a full evaluation. Stratford Hall, they're testing right now as well, but their purpose was not necessarily to test stuff. It was just to have something that's fun that they can say that they're reaching out to families. They needed sort of a new marketing outreach tool. And so with them, they're literally just testing it out with kids of people that work there. Not nearly as involved as what the Boston Children's Museum is doing, because they don't need that. It's not the same requirement.
I will say that for anyone who's at the Smithsonian, usually we open this up to other people too. We have 2 evaluators in our office, and they're interested in evaluating games. So if that's of interest to the general, to other units, we could potentially put together an SI Gaming / evaluation chat with Pino and Melissa. So if that's of interest to anyone, just let us know, and we can talk more about evaluation in games.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. I mean, I always say that you want to be testing from the very, very beginning, not only because it helps you to build, but also because testing is your best marketing. So the worst thing you can possibly do is to build out this whole awesome location-based mobile game, and when it's done, then send it out. Be like, surprise, everybody, we have a game. You don't want that to be the first time that people have seen it. Testing is a good opportunity for you to involve people from the very beginning and make them feel like they're part of this process. And that's how you start the buzz. So they start to tell people about it, and then they start to blog about it. And that was the genius of Beth Pye Lieberman from Go Smithsonian Trek, was getting all these bloggers on as testers ahead of time. That was so smart. The DeCordova Museum here in Massachusetts, they did a really great user testing just with museum members. And so they had a new game, they wanted to try it out, they invited museum members in for a Saturday, it was a sunny spring Saturday, and the families played the game, and then they sat them down and said, hey, what do you think? Interviewed the families, took really close notes, and the families, like, a lot of the feedback that they gave was, we loved being asked what we thought. We felt so important to be part of this process. They were Facebooking it, they were tweeting it, they were telling people about it. You can't do anything better than that, for your public relations. And it advertises your game, which is great. Any other questions? I will try to answer them more quickly than I did that one, I promise.
Where do you see location-based games going in the future? So maybe not right now, but 5 years down the road.
That's a very interesting question. So I think, as I'm thinking carefully about that, I think localized games are really an interesting development, which is one of the reasons that I kind of threw them in there. Localized games are really cool. They really offer more widespread opportunity than location-based games are. The thing with location-based games is that in 2010, everybody was like, awesome, location-based games, we're going to be able to engage all of these people. We can talk to them when they're in cafes, we can talk to them when they're in the airport. But then it came out, after a couple of years, Foursquare figured this out, Gowalla figured this out, Looped, Scavenger, all of these companies that hung their hat on location-based games realized that when people are in a space, often they're very busy. And when people are busy, it's really hard to capture their attention and to direct it in one way or another. So I think location-based games are going to get simpler and simpler and simpler in how people interact with them. So there's a couple of them right now that are fairly successful. Ingress is really pretty successful, and the interaction with Ingress is it's just a tap response. So you're collecting portals, going to a place, hit that portal, and then you capture it. So there's going to be this sense of varied interaction. Like you can interact with Ingress in an involved way if you want to, but you can also do it fairly quickly. People need to get in and out of one part of a location-based game, pretty fast. Zombies Run is another really cool location-based game that's been fairly successful, and And that's one where, it's a jogging app, except for you're being chased by zombies. Brilliant. Such a good idea. But again, the interaction is really easy. What do? You run. So the more complicated the interaction is, I think the more you lose people. So I definitely think that people are starting to figure that out. Easy stuff when it comes to location. I think that location-based games are probably going to get more into our sphere of the world. I think location games are going to start being more the jurisdiction, I think, of arts, culture, and education, because people have tried to make their billions of dollars off of them, and I predicted this, I just want you to know. But there's not a ton of money to be made off of these location-based games, because people are busy. However, the best way to change people's habits and to educate them and to really make an impact in people's daily life is to approach them in the world when they are with other people. How do you get people to, stop smoking? How do you get people to do things like, eat better? And the answer is almost always other people. So I think you're going to start seeing location-based games veer towards arts, culture, education, games for change. Super Better by Jane McGonigal is a really great example of this. I've had a lot of doctors and hospitals talk to us, be like, how do I create a video game to change people's habits? And it's like, you kind of don't. The quantifiable self is a really big deal now, and that's going to be connecting to location-based games. So Fitbit, and like, am I moving enough? Your phone is with you at all times, and so people are going to want to start collecting that data. So that's another direction. Also, I think that internal navigation is going to start to become something that we can do. Currently, there is no good internal navigation. There's a million different options for it, but nothing is really working. But it's a race, and there's a bunch of different organizations that are really working to make internal navigation a thing. So pretty soon, I think you're going to be able to tell if I am standing in front of the Renoir or if I'm staying in front of the Degas. Like, it's just a matter of time that you can figure out the difference between those two things. So I think that's going to be another big change in the direction of location games. Anything else? It's funny, I'm so used to talking like too much, but I think I didn't actually prepare enough for you guys today. I can sing if you'd like. I lied, I won't.
To localize games is the idea to take existing games that people are wanting to play and just, for instance, with the word game, just limit the words to words that relate to your facility, that sort of thing. Like with Heads Up.
Not necessarily. It's sort of like, have you ever heard that talk that Loic Talon gave, where he was talking about how when cars first came out that they looked exactly like carriages? And that's kind of where we are right now in terms of mobile. That when cars first came out, they looked like carriages just without horses. And in fact, that's a really inefficient way to build a car. It didn't capitalize on any of the positive aspects of a car, but we'd never seen a car before. So that's why it's kind of there. And that's what's happening with location-based games right now. Later on, when you guys test this game out, it looks a lot like a paper scavenger hunt. It's sort of what do you call it, a carriage that's been made into a car. We're not necessarily utilizing the technology in its best ways quite yet. So I think Heads Up, it is totally a paper-based game that they just put on a phone. Space Team is interesting because it's not. And that's the cool part about Space Team. So look at Space Team for like the way that things are going, because somebody finally was like, oh, this is a game that I can only play with other people, that I can only play on a phone. That's a very different thing. Yeah, so definitely play Space Team. See what you think. The guy's building some new stuff as well. Very clever. Only one person. He's one guy, and he's creating all this stuff. The first stage will be that everybody will take games that are either video games or board games, and they'll put them on their phones. That's going to be the first stage. And then when everybody looks at those and they play them, and they're like, well, these are kind of clunky, but they're on my phone, then they will start making changes on them that are best for mobile.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So obviously the Smithsonian during high season is a very busy place.
Yes.
We talked before about how to be successful, and you said you have to have your low barriers to entry and that sort of thing. So what are your thoughts if, like the Natural History Museum, it's crowded with people, and this might be their once in a lifetime or twice in a lifetime visit. How do you encourage people to engage with games when people have a very set agenda about how they want to spend their time? Like, are people going to have to choose between, are they going to feel like they're missing out if they engage for an hour in this game? Well, then we're not going to be able to see, the Hope Diamond and all the sort of greatest hits. I mean, can we make games work in our environment during our high season?
Well, the really cool part about games is that they can be very specific for your different users and what they want. So it's really hard to build one anything that's going to reach out to every single visitor. But games are a really flexible platform. So you could literally create a game where at the beginning it says, this is an interactive murder mystery. This is an interactive museum heist that will bring you through the top 10 exhibits at the Smithsonian Art Museum, or the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. So I think the really important part is figuring out, first of all, who's your user, who's playing, and second, what do they want, and how can you give that to them? So if your user is high season Museum of Natural History, what do they want? Well, they want to see this stuff for the first time, right? They've never seen it before. What do they really want? They probably want lots of pictures, right? They probably want lots of proof that they are there, that they are standing in front of the Hope Diamond. So use the game to give them the opportunity to do that. So something has been stolen. I don't know. We've been abducted by aliens. That is some wonderful story. It always helps to put a story with it. So much more fun when there's a story. The game you're about to play has no stories. I warn you ahead of time. And then send them to that location, and then give them a way to interact with it, and then collect their response, and then that gives you an opportunity to follow up with them afterwards and say, hey, by the way, user X, great picture of you at the Hope Diamond. Do you mind if we post it on our Facebook page? You really, so you can. I don't think people will feel that they're missing out if you give them the opportunity to choose what it is they're looking for in the first place.
Who is the appropriate audience for this, for games in general? It would seem to me that it would be the wrong expectation to try to get any large percentage of people coming into the museum to stop their museum experience to have an experience through a device with the museum. That it should be, for instance, when she had the bloggers come in and write about it, well, the bloggers were already completely familiar with the museum. Well, here was something new you can now do with the museum. Now we can
Exactly.
Experience. Not your first time here, do it this way.
Right. Yep, absolutely. So first of all, you never want anybody, to look at the museum this way. That is not your goal at all. Which is why you want to put as little text as possible on your game. So you want to be able to make it something that they look quickly, it sends them in a direction, and then they respond. But yeah, I agree. You really need to figure out who it is that you want and what you can do for them. Let me think. First time, well, actually, I think Agents of Change is probably a pretty good example of a really open game for first-time visitors to the Smithsonian. So Agents of Change, what we did was they had this phone. So this is Girl Scouts that had never been to the Smithsonian before. We said, okay, you live in a post-apocalyptic world, but you have the ability to travel back in time, ancient 2012. What will you capture to bring back with you to the future? Now that's a really open way to let people play a game. We didn't necessarily send them to the Hope Diamond. We let them decide, would you collect the Hope Diamond? Would you bring it back? And if so, why? Defend your collection. So that's another way to let people play. They have a storyline, there are some rules, but first of all, they're not really staring much at the screen because there's not much information there. What we're doing is creating a mission. Games are a really good way to give people a mission when they're in the museum, something that they're looking for, a purpose.
And with regard to the general public, what percentage of uptake do you have your museums experience with regard to the games? First of all, what were their expectations? Were everybody who comes in has to do this?
Oh God, no.
Happy? or that was a failure even though that should have been the mark of success?
In general, when people come to me and they say that their goal is numbers, that they have to have hundreds of thousands of people play this game, I steer them away from location-based games. Because location-based games, they just have a high barrier to entry. There's no way around it. So if you're looking for hundreds of thousands of people to hit that, you want Facebook, you want Twitter, you want video games. Probably don't want location-based games. Location-based games in general give you a high amount of personal interactive content with a smaller number of people. Oh my goodness, numbers, percentages, depends on who you're going out to as well. In 2 weeks, we had 500 Girl Scouts play our game, which I thought was actually pretty good. We were very pleased with that response. That's pretty much what we had expected. We had, like I said, maybe about, 2,500, 3,000 people, somewhere around there. I don't remember the exact number, for the Go Smithsonian Trek. Considering how many people hit the Smithsonian over the course of a summer, that is not a lot. But for a location-based game, it's pretty good. And I was with Scavenger for 3 years, and numbers were really hard for them. And that's with, one of the largest location-based games in the country with gobs of liquid cash from venture capitalists. They found numbers difficult as well. So I would say that numbers is not the best goal for location-based games.
So I take it you should be looking at targeting an audience and creating change in that audience and measuring that change in the audience. Then
exactly. Yeah, that's what I would do. That's what I like to do. It's the other nice thing about games is that they are really good PR. It's fun, it's different, it's unusual, and it doesn't take an awful lot of work to call up any newspaper or blogger and be like, hey, do you want to try our new game? Usually they'll be like, hells yeah, it's different, it's cool, it's weird. And you're a museum, you're not supposed to do weird stuff like that. So I think that what it gets in clout and press and noticeability will make up for what it misses in sort of that surface touch with hundreds of thousands of people.
Other questions? Okay, well it's about 1 o'clock. I gotta thank you so much.
You guys to play.
Very interesting and helpful.
Good. I'm so glad. I hope it was helpful. Well, honestly, feel free to ping me anytime. I could talk forever about this. I talk too much about this. I love it. I also have a blog where I rant and rave about location-based games and what's good and bad and ugly about them. So you're welcome to follow that as well. It's just greendoorlabs.wordpress.com. Feel free to ping me if you would like me to write about anything specific. If you'd like me to do a post-mortem on any of the games that we've run or talk about what was successful or not successful about different things I've seen. But let me give you a 2-second debriefing on the game that you guys are about to play. It's very exciting. So probably about, I think it was almost a year ago, I reached out to Erin and Bridget and Georgina, who's left us sadly, to see if they would be interested in taking the content that they already have on their website for interactive scavenger hunts and plugging it into our new system. Would this work? Does it work in your museum? Do we have to change the content? Can we do the content as it is? And so with some amazing interns and a lot of copying and pasting, we got, I believe it was like, how many? I think it was like 20 of their scavenger hunts into our system. And now we're at the stage where we're kind of testing them, seeing if the content works the way that we want it to. How long does it take people to get through it? Is it fun? Are they spending a lot of time looking at their phones? Because again, we want to give them a mission, but we do not want them to be staring at their phones the whole time. Are we getting the responses that we're looking to get from them, or do we need to be making edits to it? And so that's, we've already had the Art Lab kids, the Smithsonian Art Lab kids test it out, and they gave us some really awesome feedback. Made a couple of edits based on what they had to say, but really excited to hear what you guys have to say as well.
Okay, great. I think we're all pretty excited.
Great.
So thanks again. Do you have anything to say?
No. Okay, thank you, Kenyon.
All right, thank you. Have fun playing. See you soon.
See you on the mailing list.
Bye.